Hello and welcome to another episode of Pushing Boundaries, a podcast where we talk about career, growth, and development by talking to some of the most inspiring people. And my guest today is personally a big inspiration to me. He's taken the media and entertainment industry by the storm. He calls himself the media universe cartographer because he's mapping the media universe. But if you ask me, he's shaping the media universe. He's constantly inspiring organizations and individuals like myself to rethink our content strategy and embrace creator economy in one of the world's most dynamic industry, known as the media and entertainment industry, or as we all popularly call it, Hollywood. You'll spot him as the keynote speaker, speaking hard truth and sharing sharp insights with industry veterans, and keeps the leaders of the industry accountable for their measures and actions. I love that about him. His media universe map is a visual representation of the complex media universe we're all a part of. There's media companies, there's streaming companies, there's these distribution platforms and new AI companies that are coming in and disrupting the way we've been doing business. And all of this is getting more and more complex by the day. But today, we're going to find out who he is, the man underneath the phenomena, Evan Shapiro. Welcome, Evan. How are you?
Wow, that is the greatest introduction I've ever had. There's not even really a close second place. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm happy that you agreed to be on this podcast. I call you my guru and my mentor because this idea came from that conversation you and I had. And today's podcast, we're going to talk about your personal life and who you are. And I know a little bit about it. So I know you're a loving husband and you're a doting dad and you're a great friend and advisor. I call myself your friend.
You are.
And somebody who really is thoughtful in the way he's operating himself and the way he pushes boundaries. I would love for you to take us back and tell us a little bit about your childhood and early days.
Well, again, thank you. That was incredibly kind of you to say. I try to be all those things. So two of the things that are central to everything I do now, both came from my childhood. The work ethic I learned from my grandfather and my mother. And both worked incredibly hard. From my father, I kind of learned a distrust of authority. So the combination of my rebel style coming from my dad, and my hard work ethic coming from my mom's side of the family. In particular, my grandfather operated a service station, a gas station in Northeast Philadelphia. There was a Jewish pope in the neighborhood. It was probably Jules Marion, and he helped a lot of people without really ever expecting any return on that help. Gave people jobs, lent people money, gave people cars, helped people out in the middle of the night, et cetera, et cetera. And when I didn't really know that about him as much until after he passed. And I went to his funeral and I actually spoke at the funeral and there was a line to get in. And afterwards, people came up to me and said, yeah, your grandfather lent me money, gave me a job, gave me a car, picked me up in the rain in the middle of the night. And so I had always felt the work ethic being passed down my whole upbringing, but when I started to get into business and I was still in my 20s, I saw just how much of my grandfather's being was wrapped up in just being a good member of the community and being there for other people. And that stuck with me.
Wow. I can see that in you, in the way you go out of your way and help and the things you've done for the people and for the industry. It's amazing to see that it's passed on to you from your grandfather. What was that pivotal moment in your life that really shaped you into becoming this person that you are, who's fearless, in my opinion, and constantly pushes his boundaries and does things to inspire and lead?
I think the first was when I became head of marketing of the New York Shakespeare Festival and the Public Theater. Public Theater downtown, where a chorus line, Hamilton, and Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk got its start, and Shakespeare in the Park. And I was 26, and I did not deserve that job. There was nothing about me at that time which said, this guy can crush this job. And the organization turned out so much good content over a short period of time that I was able to do fun things in marketing that if you don't have great content, won't work. And we knew that 90% of our audience read the New York Times. So it was a pretty simple time. If the reviews were good, you could sell a lot of tickets. what we were able to do in a short period of time is convince a lot of amazing people like Sir Patrick Stewart to come do Shakespeare in the Park in The Tempest, to Chris Walken, Sam Shepard, and Ed Harris, and Beverly D'Angelo to come and do a play. We got Al Prince to come and do a musical. And so there was all this great talent running around. And so telling people about that is not difficult, especially when you have very few tickets to sell.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to get a job I didn't deserve, and then very fortunate that George C. Wolfe was the producer of that theater and therefore gave me this amazing canvas. And then in year 2, he gave us Patrick Stewart in The Tempest, and then he gave us Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk with Savion Glover, which was Savion's biggest Broadway place. And that was just a really propelling moment in my career when all worked right in a row. And I was lucky to have a great canvas. I was lucky to have great content to talk about, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, but it's not every day that you hear people saying, I didn't deserve all the success I got.
I knocked those out of the park, and then I got a lot of success, and I deserved that success. But that first job I was lucky to get. And then if he had programmed and produced a shitty couple of seasons, there's no way my career would have taken off the way that it did. So it was very, very fortunate. And then you look at what we did after that. I started an agency off the strength of those campaigns, which then went on to work on Rent and Chicago and Lion King.
Fantastic.
And those were all great. And that was a major move in my career, but it wouldn't have happened had the public theater not worked out as well as it did.
Right. And it's incredible that you are so self-aware of what your strengths are and where you needed to work. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was the importance of having a personal brand for anybody in today's age. So help me understand, why is the personal brand so important today?
A personal brand, I think it's always been important because it's very easy, especially given the size of the companies that some of us work for, to lose your identity to the industry. So there are a couple of dangers around that, but most notably, you fall in love with the title. And then when you don't have that title, which happens to all of us, we all don't have that title at some point. The question is, do you still get your calls returned? If your entire identity is wrapped up in the trappings of your job and the name on your card that isn't yours, so the company title, then when you're left to your own devices, it's going to be much more difficult for you to get somewhere.
I wanted to pick on something you said and also say that when you tie your identity with a company, and sometimes the company's motivations are different from how you operate, or their intentions are different, and you know where I'm going with it. But without getting into the details of how corporate America works, a lot of us know that sometimes we're asked to throw away our authentic self and put on a facade, which may or may not be what you want. Then that's another complexity with just having somebody in tagger.
And I think it's important that the culture fit is usually the most important part of any job. And so to me, having a personal brand is also kind of important from a prophylactic standpoint. There are certain companies that will never hire me, and I probably shouldn't work there.
You probably don't want to work there.
Like if I had to wear a suit and tie to an interview to get a job, I probably shouldn't work there. Because they don't really want me because I can look good in a suit and tie. They want me because they want me. Oh, for good or for bad, that's a great way to make sure that people understand what they're getting when they're getting you. So I find that to be a really good thing, just personally speaking. But on the flip side, if you need to hustle at any point for a job or for raising money, or to start a consulting career, or to win a project at a job that you already are, the awareness of you as a solid member of the community will only ever enhance what it is that you're doing. And so if you put all of your weight behind where you work, when that changes, a lot of your power will go with you.
Yeah. And I think you're lost then, because you're like, oh my God, who am I? Because you've tied your identity to the company that you're part of, and you're suddenly feeling, what do I even do?
And I see this in kind of senior director through SVP level executive who project manages a lot of things, but doesn't do panels and isn't active in the networking scene. We'll go to conferences, but just be behind the scenes. I understand that public speaking is not something that everybody feels comfortable doing. But then when it's time to describe their superpowers, a lot of their energy is lost, and it's harder for people to talk. And some people don't feel comfortable taking credit. So it is about learning how to tell your own story in a way that's going to advantage you over the long haul of a career. Because a career is not 2 years, it's not 5 years, it's not 10 years, it's 30 years, it's 40 years. And you're going to have multiple iterations of it. And so at several times during your career or careers, there will be a time when you want to get the call, you want to get the meeting. But more importantly, you want the trust of people on the other end of a deal or on the other end of a call. And I think that comes from having a brand that's meaningful when you're not in the room. No matter how good a person you are and how hard you work on your reputation, if it doesn't carry with you when you're not there, the reality can write itself.
Given the current times that we're in and so many people are getting laid off, a lot of people today don't have that choice because they've been laid off and they are now looking for a job because they have to pay their mortgage and go on with life, and they want to find the first job. And so they're going to fit into whatever mold the company wants them to fit in because they don't have a choice. And in those circumstances, I think it's fine to go on with whatever you need to do to move on with life. But I think what you're saying is longer term, think about what your superpowers are. And that's me going into my second question as to how can somebody identify what their superpowers are and use that to build their brand, which feels authentic to who they truly are.
Well, I'm going to go to two things. First, the going for the job right now, I understand that impulse, especially if you need health insurance and all the things that come with it. But a lot of the jobs that are going to be gotten in tech and media over the next 5 years aren't necessarily going to be permanent jobs. So I do think it does to look at a company's health long term so taking a job because it's the first job. Sometimes can cause more pain than it solves. Just from personal experience, I can tell you that. But then secondarily, if you're mid-career or late career and you don't have a wide network to call on to help you out through these periods, that's a good indication that you should probably have spent more time working on your personal brand, working on the network itself. I'll have people come to me and say, look, I have this network and they're not returning my calls. And I will say to them, well, when was the last time you spoke to them? Because if over 2 years you haven't spoken to them except last time when you needed some help, that's not a great relationship for you. And it's hard to have that conversation with people. So part of it is assessing the relationships that you have, being honest with yourself about the network that you do have. And then no, it's never too late, but you do have to hustle, especially if you've not done the homework previously. And part of that is skin in the game. Going through professional training, if that's something you need, getting a coach, if that's something you need. There are a ton of really good ones, affordable ones. Very often when you leave a company, they will provide you resources for personal coaching and brand building and LinkedIn profiling and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, make time to go to industry conferences. We had our first conversation at IBC, and I think you said you slotted 15 minutes for it, and we went talking for like an hour and a half, an hour. So that you're shooting fish in a barrel. Put yourself on a plane and go there. Better yet, if you know people in the industry, offer to moderate a panel. Or talk to a company who wants to pay for a panel there. Put yourself on stage there. Get a company to cover your travel if you can. Definitely get a conference badge for free. And then hardcore network for 3 days. It'll pay off. If you do that once a quarter, that's enough brand building to start to reinvigorate any brand that you have right now. Now, if you've burned a lot of bridges in your career, brand building is harder. But you don't have to talk to anyone beyond who you already know. You have 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. If you light that up with something new, surprise and delight, that will ignite that network. If you continue to follow it up with that network will light up even more, and then they will tell more people, and the algorithm will still steer opportunity your way. That's uncomfortable for some people. Putting skin in the game from a risk-taking standpoint, putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, getting on a plane and going to a conference. If you're not willing to hire a trainer, well, then don't complain when those jeans don't look good on you.
100%. And thanks for bringing back that great memory from IBC. That was my getting a taste of what it means to put the skin in the game and said, maybe he'll spend 15 minutes with me. And you graciously agreed. We had that conversation, and that was such a pivotal point in my career. I mean, you really are helping me shape the second chapter in my career.
Let's be very clear. I gave you a little advice.
You nudged. You
One,
gave me a nudge.
and then you started a podcast. So, yeah, no, to a certain extent, I gave you a little bit of a kick in the ass, just said, go and fucking do it.
Yeah.
You wanted to do it. You had the idea to do it. You had all the, you just needed someone to say, fucking just go do it.
Yeah.
And,
I needed that.
yeah, but that's because for people, I'm older than you.
Yeah.
But for people in our age groups, this is a big leap.
Yeah.
Something like this is a huge leap. For someone in their 20s, like this is Tuesday, right? So many people out there in the world, I talk about the creator economy. I talk about the importance of YouTube. I talk about all these different trends, and they're like,
Yeah.
You're wrong. They're going to change with their habits. I'm like, have you hung out with one? Because I don't think that. So you really do have to take it from the eye of the user there, and you're adapting. And I think that's amazing. But the risk is more just internal, that first step of making that leap. And you did it, and you've been crushing it. So it's amazing to watch.
Thank you. That means a lot. It's still early days.
To anybody watching this, I would say you don't have to start a podcast. Like one heartfelt post about something that's on your mind right now that you're an expert in. And you did that once a week for 2 months. That's it.
Yeah.
If all you did was that, the shape of communication in your world would change. Maybe not greatly, but it will definitely change.
It will change.
And that's a good example of just dip your toe in, put your skin in the game. You're not going to get your head crushed in if you post something on the internet. And in fact, something good might happen, but you do have to add value.
Yeah. And again, I can't thank you enough for giving me that kick that I so needed. And here we are talking on this podcast, switching boundaries. But yeah, what you covered is everyone has their own unique superpowers. Not everyone has to start a podcast or do something where they're totally out there, but they need to light up their network. They need to find things that are truly authentic to their own self and figure out how they can contribute to the world. The other thing is when you contribute with the intention of just giving, you don't understand how much more you can receive because the universe works with that law and you receive a whole lot more. So give with the intention of giving and be surprised is what I would say.
Yeah, and it's and if there is no expectation, you can only be surprised, right? The nature of it is if you add value to the community on a regular basis, value will find you. And I've always found that to be true.
Fantastic. All right, Evan, I wanted to talk about actionable advice that you can give to somebody who's navigating these challenging times today and who's probably not spent time building their brand. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's too late. I'm in my mid to late career and what can I do now? And I know that a lot of times people's reputation precedes them and you touched upon it. But if somebody is now realizing that, oh, brand building is so important, what is it that they should start doing?
I think the first thing that's important is to ask yourself, what are the priorities that you're setting for yourself? Are you looking to get a job because you need health insurance and you need money right away? Are you looking to set up an independent company that you can sell on your own? Are you looking to get into academics? Well, are you looking to change your life? You're looking to maintain it? That to me is question number one. And then that will help determine who your audience is. And so if your audience is the hirers of jobs, I do think it's important to understand where you are in the universe. So where you just exited from and the condition of the universe, the media universe in particular is a bit on fire right now. Tech is in better shape, substantially better shape. So I think if you're in media right now, I think it might be worth looking beyond the confines of the industry you grew up in. And I say that to people a lot and they don't necessarily hear that. There aren't a lot of jobs for people of your seniority that will pay what you're looking for right now in the industry. You should look further afield, and then that person doesn't do that. That's bad brand building in that you're reaching out to an audience that's not going to have work for you, looking for work, and that you're just going to be banging your head against a door, and it's not going to be enjoyable for either party. So if you are looking to go further afield than where you are, then mining your network for folks who are beyond that field.
Yeah.
who have made the transfer into automotive or healthcare or education, who can give you guidance. Start with a one-to-one conversation with someone who already likes you,
Hmm.
who's been where you've been,
Hmm.
who can give you some advice. Look for some mentoring. Those one-on-one conversations are often very influential in how you take your next steps. Brand building can start with one-on-one meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then based on how those meetings go, following up, and you
Yeah.
say, am I missing something?
Yeah.
Should
They'll
I
tell
know
you.
something about my reputation that
Yeah.
precedes me that I need to correct?
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that a number of times in my career. I had a career coach when I worked at Core TV who
Mm.
said, people think you're smart and they also fucking hate you. I had a group of people who worked for me when I ran IFC in Sundance who did an intervention and said, you're being a little crazy right now.
Yeah.
I've had really good moments in my career where someone held a three-way mirror up and said, those jeans don't look good on you.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful. And so if you're having a hard time getting your brand started, I would go to the people who know you best and ask them for advice.
Yeah.
Ask
Yeah.
them to help you tell your story. Ask them to help you shape and articulate your superpowers.
Yeah.
If you have a good network of people who already like you and cheer for you, and it's you have a good reputation and it's a decently sized, let's call it
Hmm.
high 2 figures,
Hmm.
low 3 figures. I'm not talking
Hmm.
about 4 and 5 figures of
Yeah.
network. So if you're
Yeah.
in the hundreds or thousands of people who you're connected
Mhm.
with and you
Mhm.
believe that you have a good reputation, then I think really thinking about who they are and what you want to offer to them is the
Yeah.
most important thing. So if
Yeah.
getting a job is really important,
Yeah.
then that's going to create one lens. If getting work in the short term because you need money right away and you'll take a contract or a consulting gig, then that shapes it another way. I truly believe there's a way to present yourself for both simultaneously
Yeah.
by articulating your superpowers and then following where the conversation leads from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's great advice, honestly. And I'm taking notes myself because, we constantly forget about these important things.
there are the small doable steps that everybody can take, the calls
Yes.
that they can make to their friends in the industry and ask them for advice that they
Yeah.
often don't do because they don't want to
Yeah.
seem imposing.
Yeah.
So instead we go out cold to other people for
Who don't
jobs
even know us.
who have
Yeah.
no fucking idea who we are.
Yes. Yeah. And I wanna mention two things here, and it's not a plug for your Media Universe map, but I guess becomes so relevant. I've seen it a few times because what you've done is you've really helped us understand how big the ecosystem is now. And it's not just your usual suspects. It's not just your streaming companies and media companies and distribution platforms, and the YouTubes and Prime Video of the world are what I call the distribution platforms. But you've also painted a picture of what other players there are that people don't know about. And those are peripheral players that may not be big names, but they are companies that are coming up and they're hiring. And I think you had mentioned in one of your posts that people need to start looking at things differently. Creator economy, we have to all embrace it. This podcast is my humble attempt at
Yeah,
that.
it's a good
Thank you. And just the other thing I wanted to mention was to the point that you said, ask for feedback from the people that you know. A really important point is to also work on that feedback. Because I've also seen a lot of people, especially as you grow in seniority, if you don't necessarily agree with the feedback somebody tells you and you're not going to work on it, then you can try all you want. Things are not going to change because I've told people that their reputation precedes them and they are perceived a certain way and they need to change that, but they don't do anything about it and they keep on going with it. And you mentioned that you were self-aware and you worked on it, right?
I was made self-aware. I also happen to live with someone who constantly forces me to be self-aware. And I mean that in the best. And not just her, but I have two daughters as well. My wife of 32 years and my
Yeah.
my kids of
Yeah.
29 and 26 years
Nice.
all keep me very, very honest. And the thing is, like, you don't necessarily have to correct all the things that are wrong with you. You just have to be aware that they're wrong
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to be a narcissist.
Yeah.
But I cure that by being very generous with my, which gets me podcast appearances, therefore fulfilling my narcissistic tendencies. See how that works?
I see how you spun that. That's hilarious.
By the way, that's also not entirely untrue. So the fact that I'm able to make a joke about my narcissism
Yeah,
is
you are
very clear.
self-aware.
Look at my hair. I'm a narcissist. So I'm starting a podcast. I'm a narcissist. Clearly you are too. So, but I'm aware enough of it to turn it into a brand. You can make a joke about it, but then the way I deal with it is to offer career advice very often through the platform of self-publishing. And
Yeah,
so therefore, at least I feel like there's substance to it. People
there
get
is value.
value out of the
Correct.
content itself.
Correct. And I'm hoping I generate value at some point,
You
but
do, you do.
this is my attempt
But
to
this is a
create value.
video podcast too. So clearly you are also a little narcissistic.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. I'm kidding. That's a joke.
It's fine.
It's your Christmas
I need
podcast.
somebody to tell me the truth because I'm trying to be more self-aware too. But yeah, there is an element of that with me too. And I don't mind it. I think it's fine. But
Good
yeah,
on camera. You're good on the podcast.
say that again.
You're good on camera. You're good on the podcast.
There you go. I'll take that.
You're welcome.
Great. Cool. So we spoke about individuals and people who are trying to build a brand and what other things they can do. But on the flip side, now I'm also seeing organizations and they're split between, oh, I don't want my employees to start building their own brand because they will be known as their own people. And that may not be good for my brand as a company. And I've heard leaders be aware of it and then be a little wary of that. I wanted to ask you, what do you think organizations should do in this time where everyone is so self-aware that their job today may not be the same job tomorrow? They might be stripped away from their title, their jobs completely, or it may be an entirely different thing they're required to do. And while they want to build their own brand, how can organizations help them and encourage employees to double down on their brand and help the company as well?
It's a great question. I think everybody's own personal relationship with their brand, their company, their employer is their responsibility, right? So I can't give a blanket statement or piece of advice to everyone who might watch this about how to parlay your own brand versus that of the company that you work. That said, I think there is no job on earth that should be allowed to censor who you want to be out there in the world. And so you have to figure out the first thing, who you want to be there out in the world, how comfortable are you? And then you have to figure out how that works within your relationship with your company. But not every company is for every employee and not every employee is for every company either. So if at some point if your personality is being censored by a company, you have to ask yourself how much that's worth it for the safety, security, and paycheck and health insurance and all that other kind of stuff. Only each of us individually can measure those things against each other. But then that goes back to what I said earlier, which is what are your biggest priorities right now? Why are you doing these things? What is it you need to be in the world? It's much easier for you to figure out your brand vis-a-vis your company if you understand what your priorities are.
Yeah.
That also said, there are tons of ways where you can be good for your personal brand and the company simultaneously. Just look around most conferences. Most people who are on stage are there on behalf of a brand. Those who do it well, follow their example because they're doing both simultaneously.
Correct. So I want to double down on this because I don't think a lot of companies are really understanding the value of having a solid employee brand because that can attract so much business for them. At the end of the day, all they care about is business and their sales pipeline. And I've been lucky that there were times where I was representing in a conference which had nothing to do with my company necessarily. I was talking about some totally different topic, but with conversations, they found out about my company and they're like, oh, we'd love to talk to them and see how we can partner. And sometimes that can lead to business for your company. So organizations should be open about building their own brand through this employee. And we know a lot of people in the industry that are a bigger brand than their companies. And while it's good for the employees, it's also good for those companies.
Yeah, I think there's one aspect of it, which is the outward look to potential clients and potential partners in the industry. But I also think it's really good to look at from a recruiting standpoint. So there's a lot of great talent out in the marketplace there. But when you go back and you look at long term where the best employees go, they usually go work for the best leaders. And if you have well-known leaders, I mean, I've had people work for me 2-3 times, and whether that's good or bad for them, they followed me places. That's another big sales tool. And
yeah, great point. Because these great leaders would attract great talent. And so that's a win-win for the person and the company itself. So that's fantastic. I want to touch upon something that I know is deeply personal to you, and your two daughters and your wife would agree, but I know you're a big advocate for women. I mean, you're surrounded by women in your household, so you don't have a choice there. But I've heard you talk about women in leadership, and during the elections as well. I know you were such a staunch supporter of Harris, so I know that you really double down on your thoughts when it comes to having women in leadership and having that diversity and at the top. And I wanted to understand from your perspective, organizations that want to get there but are struggling with it, because there are not that many women that are able to get to a C-suite, for example, or even a senior director or VP level. What are some of the things that the companies should do to change that? Because the number of women that are going up the leadership ladder is reducing every year. Those stats are staggering. I heard some of those stats at IBC. What are some fundamental steps companies need to do to change this?
I think the number one is to look at your culture and whether or not your culture is truly what you would say inclusive. I think it's a triggering word for a lot of people in the world right now. DEI is this kind of third rail all of a sudden, which is kind of bizarre and kind of predictable all at the same time. However, if your organization is not inclusive, if people don't feel comfortable being themselves at your company, the diversity problem isn't in diversity of race, color, creed, faith, gender, sexual preference, sexual identification, mental capacity or physical capacity. It's diversity of thought. That will pretty much predict everything that happens from that point forward.
Yeah.
The biggest changes that most organizations need to make right now isn't business model, it is cultural. Are we entrepreneurial? Are we steering a ship that's been on the same path for the last 100 years? Are we innovative, or do we not give enough people the freedom to make mistakes and self-correct and adapt and change?
Yeah.
These are cultural questions. And if you are truly inclusive, you hired a bunch of women and now you have to change the environment. And that means the temperature of the office.
Yeah. Wow, you brought that up.
It's the temperature of the office. It's work from home policy. It's all of these things. You have to change the nature because of the nature of your business. Anyway, so do we want younger people? Do we want the percentage of the office to be under the age of 40 to reflect the percentage of people under 40 in the United States? Well, then you're going to have to change things.
Yeah. And exactly to the point. But a lot of companies try and do that by hiring women and saying, "Oh, we'll give you a seat at the table."
That's diversity.
Yeah,
that's not inclusion.
That's not inclusion.
Not equity.
Exactly.
That is diversity.
Exactly.
So that's great.
So
congratulations.
check
You checked one of the 3 boxes.
Exactly.
You got a 37 on the test. Congratulations.
Exactly. It's crazy that people don't understand that. They think that it's done. That one check box is done. And I've been in meetings where I'm the only person and my perspective is pointless because everyone else is of the same opinion because that's how they're wired. They're like, well,
that's what happens in these organizations is you hire people who are of different profiles than who normally hired. Whether it's me because I'm loud or you because you're also loud. And smart, that suddenly becomes, well, someone's got to keep her quiet. Someone's got to keep them quiet. And then that's how you wind up back in the same place. So it's not enough to just hire.
Yes.
And especially when it's just checking a box or worse, seen as charity. It has to be systemic. It has to be cultural. It has to be bonused upon. It has to really change in the organization, not just on a cosmetic standpoint.
Correct. And I want to come back to the point that I think if you're really intentional about it, then you will know what all needs to be done and not just check one of the boxes and say, "Oh, we did it."
I think it's fine to give people permission to not know as long as they take an active role in finding out. And that is not the pathway that most people my age and up take right now. That is older Gen Xers and boomers. On one end of the spectrum, you have the creator sphere winning an election and then breaking Netflix with Jake Paul. Reinforcing kind of some traditional boxing match, 100 million people.
Yeah.
and re-election of a 80-year-old Republican. So there is a collision of these two worldviews happening right now that I think people should be paying attention to. But you have to wake up stupid every day and pay attention to these things. Yes. And I've been saying this for years. If you're in a room making decisions and nobody in the room grew up too poor to afford Netflix, then probably not really aware of what's happening out in most of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're missing out on that perspective and that kind of their viewpoint entirely. And living in America, I think we're all living in a bubble, to be honest. But to me personally, those occasional visits to India are my reality check.
Yeah.
A huge population. Netflix is crazy luxury for them. 2 square meals is luxury for them. Great. So here we are, back with Evan. And I will own up to the snafu that happened the last time because it happens to me whenever I talk to him. I get so engrossed in everything he has to say. We did a great podcast recording. I stopped recording. We kept talking for 45 minutes. Never realized that I didn't do a proper outro with him. Only after weeks that I was editing, and I was like, wait a second, I didn't record the outro with him. And I reached back to him, and Evan has graciously agreed to do an outro. So here we are, weeks later.
The only reason I agreed to do the outro is so I could wear my Eagles sweater.
And it looks incredible. And so was your haircut.
Thank you. We did actually just catch up about my hair because your son likes my hair.
Yes, loves your hair.
Thank you. And he wanted to know the name of my barber, and I told you I cut my own hair. So, and I did. I cut my own hair. I learned to do it during COVID, and now it's become such a part of my brain. And I actually don't enjoy it. It's very nerve-wracking to cut your own hair. But I have saved so much money, and I get to cut my hair whenever I want, so it never changes shape.
It's incredible. I mean, I honestly didn't think you would cut your hair because it looks perfect.
Here, I'll do a rough.
Fantastic. Thank you for the spin.
Thank you.
You're inspiring. I mean, I'm not going to cut my hair. I'll be honest.
I have encouraged our podcast. I did not encourage you to cut your own hair.
Yes.
But actually, this also gives me the opportunity. I just launched a podcast.
Yes.
About 4 weeks ago called The Media Odyssey with Marianne Runchette. And that is now available wherever you get your podcast. So I'm glad that you screwed up because it gives me the opportunity to wear my swing, talk about my hair, and plug my podcast.
Yeah. And I have heard the episodes and it's fantastic. And it's amazing to get those insights from you and Marianne. And hilarious too. You bring that sense of humor. You brought that to my podcast and I see that with Marianne.
Yeah. I was watching the clips back that you sent over, and we laughed a lot.
We laughed a lot. And I was trying to get pictures of us smiling, and most of the time we were either out of frame, laughing.
Right.
I was like, those are the pictures and screenshots I have, but it tells a story. We had a great time. Thank you for making me laugh and learn at the same time. It doesn't happen a lot. And it's incredible that I'm learning so much from you, and hopefully through the podcast, my podcast, your podcast, we're trying to change the world one person at a time, hopefully.
There you go. At least our corner of it anyway. Yeah, it was big. I really enjoyed that conversation we had. I enjoyed our first conversation at IBC. Yeah. I've enjoyed our correspondence since then, and I really, really had a blast. As the tape you just watched proves, we had a blast recording that pod with you. So thank you very much. I'm just really glad this is happening for you, and really grateful that you invited me on.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. And I'm going to continue to bother you with requests like this because it's endearing that, you show up graciously. And every time I talk to you, there's something new I learn. So
thanks. Well, you learned I cut my own hair.
You cut your own hair, which is another skill set, which is really hard for anyone to adopt. So I don't think you're recommending that necessarily.
I am recommending it. This is going to sound misogynistic, but I am recommending it for men because it's easier for us to do. And I think being able to trim your own hair whenever you want is a time hack. It's you don't have to wait at the barbershop. You don't have to spend the money, and you can always kind of like keep the haircut that you best like.
Yeah.
And so, yes, on this podcast about and careers, I am suggesting that all men should cut their own hair.
There you go. So we spoke about brand building. We spoke about being self-aware.
As you said, my hair is now a big part of my brand.
It is a big part of your brand. I mean, I think people know you for your hair too. So
yeah, it's how people spot me. conferences. Yeah.
And your sense of humor, which is impeccable. So
Okay. I think it's, but okay.
thanks so much, Evan. This is so much fun. And I'm so looking forward to watching your podcast and learning from you as we keep going.
Thanks. Same right back at you.